begin today by saying hello to my good friend Barnaby Feeder, who graced the pulpit at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Orange a few weeks ago and did a great job. Hope you will come back again. Nice to see you. I get to Montclair every once in a while. I'm a tour guide at the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center and enjoy doing that. If you haven't been up there, I recommend it. They're going through a renovation now that's going to about double the size of their exhibit space, and it'll be even more fun to go up there and visit. The cover of the Order of Service today is a map of how to get to the church in Orange. Not to be too obvious about it, but there it is. If you go there, you will get lost the first time. That's part of the initiation of going to many Unitarian Universalist churches, apparently, including this one. We're on a one-way street. Unlike our theology, our street is one way, and it's just off of Main Street, and probably just as easy to park along Main Street and walk to us, if you like. The title, Charity or Solidarity, is because I think the Unitarian Universalists need to move from charity to solidarity, and so I thought I'd explain a little bit what I mean by those two words. In 1 Corinthians, the famous phrase, faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. And love in many places in the New Testament is the Greek word agape. And agape is usually thought of as being the love that God has for his or her or its creation. In the New Testament, it specifically refers to the love that Jesus has for humanity. That's what charity is. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to do and to give, but also it really sets kind of a high standard. And the other thing it does is it implies a kind of top down to it. It's from God to the creation. And as such, with charity, it's hard to avoid at least a little bit of the patronizing air, a bit of the condescension, the giving of alms, so to speak. Now, charity is a good thing. I'm all for it. We should all do more of it. But solidarity, on the other hand, I think of as not bestowing upon, but standing with. Jack London has a good quote about this. I was in Oakland in the fall, staying at a place called the Jack London Inn, which was every bit as seedy as you would think a London for Jack London should have been. It was sort of like a Jack Kerouac bar and grill, not a real high-class place. But I really liked it. It had a quote from Jack London. "A bone to the dog is not charity. Charity is the bone shared with the dog when you are just as hungry as the dog." Now to me, I would say a bone to the dog is charity. A bone shared with the dog when you're just as hungry as the dog, that's solidarity. So now, it's my thesis today that Unitarian Universalism, for its own good and the good of the world, needs to continue its charity but deepen and widen its solidarity. Now, in order to do that, how do Unitarian Universalists become just as hungry as the dog? Now, in comparing people to dogs, I don't believe I'm insulting people, although I may be insulting dogs. The answer to how Unitarian Universalists get just as hungry as the dog is you must be born again. Now, I'm sure many of you thought that's the last thing you would want to hear in a Unitarian Universalist church. And the context that it's usually spoken is the last thing I would want to hear. But if you actually go back to the Bible and understand how Jesus originally said it, you will realize how wrong and unbiblical the normal way born again is used really is. The only time that Jesus said you must be born again, the only time, was to one person in a private meeting under cover of darkness. So it always seemed to me, if being born again was such a central part of Jesus' theology, he would have included it in the Sermon on the Mount. He would have said it in his public ministry. He didn't. He said it to one person. That one person was a man named Nicodemus, which, as the opening words said, was a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin Council. It would be the equivalent of being a member of Congress. He was rich. He was influential. He was educated. He was a leader of the community. It says in the Bible that Nicodemus did three things. And because of these three things, I say Nicodemus was a liberal. Nicodemus, curious about the teachings of this new prophet, asked to speak with him. He didn't take it on hearsay. He went right to Jesus to find out what he was all about. Later, at the trial of Jesus, he raised the point of order, a point of objection to the unjust way that the trial was being conducted. And third, it is written that he paid for Jesus' funeral. And to me, that is the very worst of liberalism. He heard the words of the justice. He spoke out about injustice. He raised the point of order, and he paid for the prophet's burial. Let's look at our history. Henry David Thoreau went to jail for failing to pay the war tax for the Mexican War. He thought it was paying for the extension of slavery, and he was right. When his friend Emerson came to visit, Emerson said, "Why are you in jail?" And Thoreau said, "Why are you not in jail?" But Thoreau was the only Unitarian in Cambridge that was in jail. The rest of those were paying the war tax, and Thoreau was considered a radical. At about the same time, the Reverend Theodore Parker was the minister of the church in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. He kept a pistol in the drawer of his office. His church was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and at the same time, he was not allowed to speak in many of the Unitarian churches because he had the dangerous theology of transcendentalism, the theology that caused him to write one time the words "of the people, by the people, and for the people." The theology that caused him to write another time, "The arc of history is long but bends toward justice," which was used by Dr. King and President Obama. But he was not allowed to speak in many of the pulpits because of this dangerous theology. And his was the only church that was a stop on the Underground Railroad. The rest of the Unitarians were obeying the Fugitive Slave Act. Half a century later, Frank Oliver Hall was the minister of the church I used to serve in Manhattan. His pacifist views got him fired. Barnaby preached recently about the Universalist minister of the church in Newark, whose dangerous associations defending Jews in the 1930s and mediating with labor organizations caused him to fall out of favor with the Universalists in Newark. Reverend James Reeb, a young Unitarian minister, was killed, beaten to death on the streets of Selma. Many Unitarian Universalists marched with him also, but just a few years later, Unitarian Universalists failed in the black empowerment controversy, failed to come together toward justice. In the Roman Catholic Church, you worship your saints, you don't try to live like them. Unitarian Universalists often do the same. So how then are Unitarian Universalists to be born again? How can you do more than Nicodemus? How do you do more than raise a point of order to injustice and pay for the burial of its prophets? Move beyond diversity. This is what I've learned by being a minister of a congregation that is 85% white in a community that is 85% black and tan. If Unitarian Universalists think they must be diverse before they can be just, they will be neither. Look, diversity is fine. Nothing wrong with it. So is winning the lottery. And I'm not counting on either one being accomplished soon. Here's what I learned about diversity when my daughter applied to college about 5 years ago.